The chipped ceramic mug, still warm from the tea I brewed, hoping to chase away the creeping anxiety, felt slick and unfamiliar in my hands. It's safe to say I've never told anyone the whole truth about that puzzle, about what happened in my little apartment on Elm Street. Even now, with the memory a cold, heavy stone in my gut, the words feel like they're clawing their way out of my throat, desperate for release. Let's do a roll call. Drop your country flag in the comments so I know where all the horror fans are watching from. I know many of you use these scary stories to relax and fall asleep, and I'm doing my best to grow this little channel. Share your feedback, it helps me a lot. Let me know in the comments things like, are the stories too long or too short? Do you want more sound effects? Is the narration calming enough? Your words keep me going. Now, let's dive in. It started, as these things often do, with something mundane. A Saturday morning, the kind where the world outside feels soft and hazy, and all you want is to indulge in a bit of quiet aimlessness. I was browsing Mrs. Gable's sprawling yard sale, the kind that overflows with the forgotten detritus of a lifetime. Amongst the dusty porcelain dolls with unsettlingly vacant stares and moth-eaten wool blankets, I spotted it, a wooden box, its corners worn smooth with age, emblazoned with a faded, almost whimsical picture of a pastoral scene. The Meadow's Whisper. The label read in elegant script. Inside, nestled in tissue paper that smelled faintly of lavender and decay, were thousands of irregularly shaped cardboard pieces. It was a vintage jigsaw puzzle, an antique, and it called to something in me, a yearning for order, for completion. I bought it for a song, picturing a quiet afternoon spent piecing together a forgotten landscape. Back in my apartment, the late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. My apartment itself was nothing special. A second-floor walk-up with hardwood floors that creaked in familiar places and a view of a sleepy brick alleyway. I unfurled the large, slightly brittle diagram onto my coffee table, the only surface big enough to accommodate the unfolding chaos of the puzzle. The image was intricate, a sprawling meadow dotted with wildflowers, a lazy stream winding through it, and in the distance, a cluster of old oak trees. The first few hours were soothing, almost meditative. The satisfying click of one piece finding its mate, the gradual emergence of color and form. It was a welcome distraction from the usual hum of everyday worries. I remember laughing to myself about how many shades of green there were, how the artist had captured the subtle variations in the grass. But as the puzzle grew, a subtle disquiet began to settle in. The details were too precise. I found myself staring at a particularly intricate knot in a wooden fence, a knot I'd seen before, not in a meadow, but in the weathered railing of my own balcony. Then came the armchair, a deep, comforting burgundy, the exact same shade as the one I'd inherited from my grandmother, the one currently occupying a prominent spot in my living room. My breath hitched. It was a coincidence, I told myself, a common enough color for furniture. But the unease gnawed at me. I started scrutinizing the pieces more closely, my fingers tracing the edges, searching for something familiar, something wrong. The meadow began to take on a strangely domestic yet alien quality. The stream seemed to meander not through some idyllic countryside but past familiar furniture. I saw the worn spines of my own books on a shelf, the chipped paint on the windowsill. And then, as I slotted in a piece that defined the corner of a room, my blood ran cold. It was my living room, unmistakably. The same patterned rug, the same slightly crooked lamp, even the faint water stain on the ceiling from that leaky pipe last winter. The puzzle wasn't a pastoral scene, it was my apartment. Hold on, real question for you guys. Pause for a second. Who do you think is scarier, children, ghosts, or old haunted women spirits? Comment your choice. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle my skin. This was impossible. A trick of the light, a feverish imagination fueled by too much caffeine. I stood up, my legs trembling, and looked around my actual apartment. Everything was as it should be. The sunlight was fading, casting long shadows that stretched in warped, familiar shapes, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. I returned to the puzzle, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I forced myself to continue, a morbid fascination overriding my fear. The pieces fitted together with an almost unnatural ease, as if guided by an unseen hand. And then I saw it. In the center of the room, sprawled on the rug, was a figure. It was a woman, lying still, her eyes wide and staring up at the ceiling. Her hair, a dark cascade, splayed around her head like a morbid halo. My breath caught in my throat. Her clothing, it was my favorite blue sweater, the one I'd worn earlier that week. In the position, the way her arm was twisted at an unnatural angle, it was eerily similar to a fall I had taken down the stairs last year, only this was so much worse. This was no longer a game. This was a prophecy, a morbid blueprint of my own demise. This sheer terror was paralyzing. I wanted to scream, to shatter the box, to burn the pieces, but my limbs felt heavy, useless. My mind raced, conjuring all sorts of unspeakable possibilities. Who could have made this? How could they have known? With a surge of adrenaline, I grabbed the puzzle box, intending to throw it out, to bury it somewhere it could never be found. But as my fingers closed around the cardboard, a new piece, a tiny sliver of dark wood, seemed to materialize under my hand. It was the missing corner piece, the very last one. It depicted the window, and through it, the familiar brick wall of the alley. My hand shook as I reached for it. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I shouldn't. But the compulsion was overwhelming. The diagram of my apartment was nearly complete, save for this one final damning piece. With a ragged breath, I pushed it into its place. And then, the air in the room changed. It grew heavy, thick, suffocating. The comforting scent of old paper was replaced by something metallic, something sickly sweet. A faint, almost imperceptible warmth began to spread from the rug and the puzzle. A warmth that mirrored a growing ache in my own side. I looked down, my eyes widening in horror. A dark, viscous stain was blooming on my blue sweater, spreading across the fabric like an ink blot. The feeling of a dull thud, a final, sickening impact, resonated through my very bones. I looked back at the puzzle. The woman on the rug, the woman who was me, was no longer just an image. The puddle of blood beneath her seemed to deepen, to gleam with a horrifying, wet sheen. And then, as I watched, frozen in a tableau of pure, unadulterated terror, the stain on my own sweater darkened, spreading, the metallic scent filling my nostrils. The last piece hadn't just completed the puzzle. It had completed me. Thank you for being here. It keeps me going. If you want more horror every week, subscribe and join our little haunted family.